Welcome back to my Supernatural Life Network. This next story comes to us from a young single mom who asked to be called Lindsay from Joshua Tree, California. We hope you enjoy her story. Hi, for the purposes of this video, just call me Lindsay. I don't want to use my real name. I'm not really sure why I'm sharing this. I guess I just wanted to share this since I haven't talked about it for years and I don't know what to do about it. This happened a few years ago on Halloween. It was either 2014 or 2015, I can't remember exactly which. I live in a rural town called Joshua Tree in the desert of Southern California, which is near a slightly bigger town called Yucca Valley, where I normally take my two kids trick-or-treating because you end up running into other parents with their kids and you form a sort of group as you go house to house. Being a single mother, groups make me feel safer, as much of an illusion as that may be, but whatever, at least I feel safer. Trunk or treats seem to be popular, but we don't go to those anymore. My kids really like the real trick-or-treating experience, going house to house through the neighborhoods. Though we normally go to Yucca Valley for trick-or-treating, on this particular year, my kids begged me to trick-or-treat in our own town of Joshua Tree. Looking back, this is where I pinpoint the weirdness start to happen. I mean, we normally go to Yucca. I don't know what the appeal was. I kept telling them that they would get more candy in the neighboring town, but they didn't want to go over. In any case, the deal I made them is that we could do it in Joshua Tree if they could convince our neighbor, let's call him Jim, to go with us. Jim is a retired vet that was in the Marines. He was stationed in the Marine base we have in the neighboring town due east. I figured if we weren't likely to run into another group of parents, it'd be nice to have someone like Jim tag along. It didn't take them long to convince him either, the little monsters, so the date was set. The day of, I asked Jim if he wanted to bring along some of his gadgets that he could show me to make it more interesting for him. He has some military-grade stuff like night vision goggles and infrared goggles and what have you. I figured we could make the time go by faster by looking around at the desert in the dark. Since we wouldn't be walking up to each door with the kids, we just kind of watched them from the street as they approached the homes. So there they were, the little ones, excited as they went from house to house. Jim seemed to be enjoying taking a walk with us too, which made me happy. I had been afraid we would inconvenience him. He showed me how the scopes worked and let me know of some things to watch out for. Apparently, lights can damage night vision equipment, so we made sure not to point it at any lights. Luckily, this town is kind of dark anyway. Plus, we kind of stayed towards the edges of the town. Well, as it turns out, the idea of looking out to the desert with Jim's gadgets was actually really fun. We took turns looking out towards the darkness and watching the kids. It was amazing to me how many things we just don't see with our naked eyes. We only went out for about an hour to an hour and a half, and in that time, I saw some wildlife out in the darkness. Coyotes, rabbits, and other small animals. It's a shame we didn't have a full moon to really light up the desert, but the partial moon combined with the night vision stuff really helped to see things out in the sand. We were having fun. That's when things took a turn, and that's when I saw them. I lowered the night vision scope and tried to tell myself it was my imagination. I stayed quiet as I raised it to my eye again. Sure enough, maybe 150 yards or so. I must admit I'm not very good with longer distances, but off in the distance, about at the edge of where the night vision scope could see, I saw two human-like figures. But they weren't exactly the shape of human beings. They had elongated limbs and their movements were just weird. They seemed to be having some kind of conversation in the middle of some desert bushes. There were no houses, structures, or any reason why anybody should be out there. I whispered to Jim what I was seeing, and I asked him to look as I handed him the night vision scope. He took a deep breath and looked. Then he lowered the scope just a bit so he could look with his naked eye. Then he raised the scope to his eye again. His body language told me that he saw them too. Yet what he said was, "I don't think there's anything there. Maybe there's something wrong with this thing." He then pulled out his infrared scope and looked. "See," he said, "nothing there." He handed me the infrared so I could see, and just as he said, they weren't there. "Let me see both the scopes," I said. He handed them to me. I looked through the night vision again. There they were. Then I tried the infrared one more time. They were gone. I tried this a couple times, and on about the third time, I held the night vision up to my eye and my heart sank like a brick and I couldn't breathe when I saw one of the figures distinctly turn its head to look right at me. Then the other one did the same. That's when I just said, "We're done, let's go." I handed the scopes back to Jim and went to grab the kids. Jim followed closely as I explained what had just happened. For some reason, I felt a distinct feeling that we shouldn't look back, so I gave Jim that warning as well. Poor Jim must have thought I was crazy, but I didn't care. I just cared about my kids at that point. We hurried home and made it safe and sound. I thanked Jim and apologized profusely. He was such a good sport. I swear, I have the best neighbor. Anyway, the rest of the evening went by with not much happening, and I sent the kids to bed after letting them stay up for a little bit. After all, it was the weekend. I kept thinking about the incident though. I was so glad to be home. I went to bed soon after myself. I thought it was all over, but to my dismay, I was awakened around 2 in the morning to some scratching around the house. Now I do admit that we do get some strong winds out here in the desert, and I can see why anyone could say that it could have been that, but I don't know. The scratching just felt different, you know? It was all around the house and rhythmic. On the sides, further on the other side, on the roof. It just went all over. I felt the tiny hairs on my skin stand on end, and I got goosebumps running down my neck and spine. I was sure it was them again. I immediately went to my kids' room and just locked us all in the same room. I called Jim and woke him up, the poor guy. I asked him to just look out his window towards our place and let me know if he saw anything. He didn't, of course. He talked with me a little bit on the phone just until I calmed down a bit, and he assured me that if I needed to call him again, not to hesitate in doing so, no matter the time of night. I thanked him again as we hung up. I felt a little better. The scratching stopped, but I didn't sleep at all the rest of the night. In fact, for the following few weeks, I didn't sleep right. I just kept psyching myself out. I tried telling some of my other friends over the next few days. None of them believed me, and they all just came up with their own possible reasons as to what I actually saw, or what actually happened. For this reason, I hadn't really mentioned it to anyone, not even Jim. That is, I hadn't until I made contact with you guys on this channel. You believe me, right? Yes, we do, Lindsay. That was your experience. Thank you for sharing. We know it can't be easy. If you enjoyed our video, please give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing. If you have a story you'd like to get off your chest, we'd love for you to share it on our channel. Check the links in the description to share a story. Until next time, keep an open eye.